Hi guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel and welcome to my June reading wrap up. I read 8 books in June and I did end up having a 5-star, but I also had one book that was a really big disappointment for me and ended up being a 2.5 star. And then everything else I kind of rated in between. So my opinions on the 8 books I read are very varied and all over the place. In my mind, I think I was doing a better job at sticking to the TBR I said at the beginning of the month than I actually did, because I got through 4 out of the 8 that I picked, so 50% of the way through. As for the other 4 books I read, they were either a Kindle Unlimited book or an audio book. I like to read all the books that I set at the beginning of the month on my TBR physically, and then for the other books I do kind of let myself stray depending on whatever audiobooks are available through my library, or if I get a good deal on one. I do like to have something to listen to on the go, and I do have a Kindle Unlimited, so I don't want that membership to go to waste, so I do try to use it as much as possible. But for the TBR I set, I do try to read those books physically. So with that overview on how my reading month was, let's jump into the wrap up. The first 3 books that I read in the month of June are part of a reading vlog that's up on my channel, where I had a random number generator decide how many hours I was reading for each day. And the first book I read is The Idea of You. This one is on Kindle Unlimited, and I feel like I was just seeing so much about the movie, and the movie looked so good to me, so I was really intrigued to pick up the book first because I did really want to read that before watching the movie. The only thing I really knew about this going into it is that people say it's basically Harry Styles fanfic, and I wasn't sure how I would feel about that. I am a big Harry Styles fan, but I never really had a desire to read fan fiction, so I don't know, I feel like I just went in with pretty neutral expectations. So basically the storyline of this book is that we're following our main character named Celine. She is a 39-year-old single mother, and she ends up taking her daughter and her daughter's friends to see their very favorite boy band called August Moon, and they end up having like meet and greet backstage passes, so they get to go backstage, meet all the band members, chat with them. She ends up really hitting it off with this one member of the band named Hayes Campbell. He really takes a liking to her. He starts pursuing Celine, but it is a big age gap between them because, like I said, she's 39, he's 20, so there is a big age gap. And aside from that, there are other things that really do make the relationship a little bit tricky and complicated, and I really enjoyed this one overall. I did end up giving it 4 stars. When I first started it, I was not sure about it at all. The first like 20% read very fan fiction-y to me, to the point of it feeling like a little girl was writing about her fantasy that she wanted to happen when she went to a concert, and I was like, I don't think this is for me. I was considering DNFing, but I was pushing through, and I don't know, something kind of shifted for me after the first 20%, and I got really invested in the relationship. It almost felt like the writing style kind of shifted. I don't know, it just was reading less fan fiction-y and more just like a romance. The relationship itself was kind of hard to root for. Aside from the age gap, there were other things that just made their relationship complicated, so I was always kind of going back and forth on whether or not I wanted them to be together. I feel like I really did like Hayes' character. He was very charming and very sweet, and I feel like he really cared for Celine so much, but I feel like Celine could be kind of negative and would just point out the bad things about their relationship and why they wouldn't work and why they shouldn't be together. And so by the end, she was really frustrating me. Some of Celine's concerns on the relationship though were very valid, and I feel like it led to really good commentary on kind of how women of a certain age are viewed versus how men are viewed. I also thought there was really interesting commentary on the things women like and how they're often seen as very trivial and unimportant, which boy bands was kind of the example in this story. Again, sometimes it was hard to root for the relationship, and I didn't love the ending of this one. I will say overall I liked the book better than the movie. I did end up watching the movie once I finished the book. I just feel like the book did a better job at getting to see inside the characters' heads and kind of how they felt about one another, and I really liked the dynamic between the band members better in the book than I did the movie, but I will say I preferred the ending of the movie to the ending of the book. Those are my thoughts on The Idea of You. Then I ended up picking up an audiobook. I listened to The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. She is the same author as the One of Us is Lying series, which I read a couple of those books and did find them enjoyable. So when I heard about The Cousins, it was kind of on my radar for the summertime because of the setting. Basically in this book, we're following these 3 cousins, and they unexpectedly get this letter at the beginning of the summer from their grandmother, who they've been estranged from for pretty much their whole lives. And she owns this island, she runs this resort on the island, and she's inviting them all to come work at the resort for the summer and stay with her. And it's kind of unexpected because the grandmother grandmother cut off all of the cousins' parents from their inheritance, and the parents really have no idea why. They've never understood it. It just kind of happened out of the blue. So all the parents are like pushing the cousins to go to try and scope things out and figure out if they can get some answers from the grandmother. I gave this one 3 stars. I liked it okay. I really did love the premise and the setting, and I feel like it started out so strong. I was so interested in the storyline and I loved all the characters. I found them all to be very, very interesting, but I feel like the more the story went on, it just kind of got less and less interesting for me, and the way things were unfolding, I just got less and less invested, and by the end I just didn't really care all that much. But it was a really good one for the summertime because of the setting, and overall it was enjoyable and really well narrated. Julia Whelan is actually one of the voice actors in the narration, and it's a full cast, so I would recommend it on audio, and I would recommend it for the summertime because of the setting, but it's not going to be one that really sticks with me. It wasn't a new favorite or anything, but it was good in the moment. And then the first book I got to from my June TBR is The Rule Book by Sarah Adams. This is her latest release that came out in April, and this is the book that follows the cheat sheet. So it's book number 2 in this little duology. And in this book, we're following Derek, who is an NFL player. He's on the same team as Nathan from the cheat sheet. And then our female main character is Nora, and she is a sports agent who gets assigned to be Derek's agent. But it's really awkward between them because they are actually exes that had a really bad breakup in college. And so we're kind of trying to figure out why things ended between them and if they can rekindle things. And there's a lot of other tropes kind of thrown in along the way that I didn't expect. So I feel like that's all you should know going in, because I didn't read the back super carefully, and I'm glad I didn't because I had a really fun time just seeing things unfold as I read. But I really enjoyed this one. I gave the cheat sheet 4 stars, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. I enjoyed them about the same, I would say. You kind of have to go into a Sarah Adams book knowing it's just going to be cupcake, fluffy, happy rom-com. Don't take it too seriously. It's not anything too crazy deep. It's just a fun time. Her female main characters, I say, always feel like a Disney princess, and they're a little bit overly quirky at times. They're a little bit bubbly and just kind of like silly goofy, but they're just fun to read about. It's easy to turn off your brain and just enjoy this one. This is such a good one for summer. I don't really want to say why, but you'll kind of figure out as you're reading. And it ended up being just the perfect summer rom-com. It was so cute. The ending, I will say, was a little bit over the top. Like, I feel like it could have wrapped up sooner than it did, and it kind of just ended up being one thing after the next, and it was just a little bit unnecessary and dragged out. But overall, this one was very cute, and I would highly recommend it for the summertime. Then I ended up reading None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I don't have the physical copy with me because I actually gave it to my mom as soon as I finished it, but I did end up reading it physically and then in tandem with the audiobook because I heard such great things about the audiobook. I would recommend both ways. I read the majority of it physically, but I did really like the little bits of the audiobook that I listened to throughout. Both were so good, and I had the best reading experience reading it both ways, so I would recommend either one. But basically, in this book, we're following these 2 women, and they end up crossing paths when they're out at this like restaurant pub celebrating their birthdays. And when they run into one another, they're like, oh my gosh, we're both celebrating our 45th birthdays. We're both born on the same day. Such a coincidence. And one of the women is actually this well-known podcaster, and she hosts women on her podcast who are very successful. She kind of shares their success stories with her listeners. And this other woman is like, hey, I would love to be featured on your podcast. I know I'm not really successful. I don't have a success story for you to share yet, but I'm currently in the process of making some big changes in my life, and I think it would be really interesting for you to document that on your podcast. And from there, so much craziness unfolds. That's all you need to know going into this one. But I absolutely love this book. I gave it 5 stars. Every time I pick up a thriller, this is literally what I want. It gave me everything. It was so perfectly paced and timed. I could not put this one down. I was on the edge of my seat. It had everything. It had the interesting storyline. The plot twist got me. I was invested in the characters. I loved it so much, and I had heard good things about this one, but I wasn't necessarily expecting to love it because I've only read one other Lisa Jewell book, which is Then She Was Gone, and I didn't love that one. So I wasn't sure how I would feel about more of her books, but this one really worked for me. It just hooked me from the moment I picked it up and gripped me, and I could not put it down. There were the perfect amount of like details and depth and layers to the story without feeling like too much, and you would kind of be reading and I would be like, okay, I think I maybe know where this is going, and then she'd randomly throw in something else and I'd be like, wait, what is happening? What does that mean? So it was just the best time. One of my favorite books I've read so far this year, probably my second favorite right after Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and I think it's perfect for summer too. I would highly recommend it as a summer thriller because it actually takes place during the summertime. Then I read Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. This one doesn't really have like a premise or storyline for me to tell you guys, but basically it is a rom-com between two serial killers. It is kind of dark and gory, but it also has that comedic aspect to it. Unfortunately, this one did not work for me. I gave it 2.5 stars. It was just such a disappointment, and my rating isn't probably for the reason you would think I would give this book a lower rating. I feel like I have a pretty high tolerance when it comes to gross things. I don't really have any triggers. There are like 2 pages of trigger warnings in this book, and I was just kind of like laughing at everything. I was like, wow, this is crazy. I am excited. And the gore, the darkness of it, the killings, none of that really bothered me. I feel like it could have taken things a little bit further because I was just honestly so bored. I loved the premise of this so much, but I did not love the execution. I feel like the way the story was told kind of didn't work for me. There's not really a clear narrative throughout. It's more like little vignettes, little mini stories, and then it'll be these random big time jumps in between. So one interaction will happen between the 2 main characters, and then a year will pass, and then they'll meet up again, and then 6 months will pass and you'll see something between them. I just felt like a lot of the relationship growth and development happened off page. We didn't really get to see that much between them, I feel, when they were together. So I just didn't really care about them as characters. I didn't really care about anything that was happening. I was picking this up hoping it would be a lot like the Mindfuck series, and it didn't really give that for me. I was just not having a fun time with this one. I was really skimming it by the end. I should have DNF'd it. The ending, I will say, turned things around a little bit and bumped it up from a 2 star to a 2.5. I know that's so picky, but something unexpected did happen that I thought was well done. Other than that, I probably could have DNF'd this one. Then I read Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. This one follows Will and Fern, and we see that they had this one date together in the past where they met and kind of had this unexpected connection and friendship form that maybe turned into something a little bit more, and they end up going around the city doing all these fun things together over the course of this one day. When the day comes to an end, they end up making this promise to one another that they'll meet one another a year from that day at Fern's family's like resort that they own at this lake, and then a year from then, Will doesn't show up, Fern does. So then about 10 years later in our present day timeline, we have Fern, and she's running her mother's resort, and Will ends up unexpectedly showing up there 10 years later, and it follows things and their lives and their relationships. And I unexpectedly really liked this one way more than I thought I would. I gave it 3.75 stars. The thing with this book is I read Carly Fortune's debut the year it came out, absolutely loved it, gave that book 5 stars. It was one of my favorites. I know it had mixed reviews and I could see where people were coming from with their critiques, but the trope in that book and the things that people were bothered by, I thought were really well done, and I could kind of understand why things happened the way they did. So when this book came out, I was so very excited that Carly Fortune had another summer romance. I was so excited to pick it up, but then I just heard nothing but negative reviews for this one. So I kind of went into it with really low expectations. I heard that it had the same trope as her first book, so I don't know, I wasn't that eager to pick it up. I was considering unhauling it and jumping straight into her release that just came out this summer, but I'm so glad that I didn't skip over this one or unhaul it because I really enjoyed it. I was just reminded of how much I love Carly Fortune's writing. I thought this book had so much depth to it, both the storyline and the characters. I really enjoyed our main character, Fern. I felt like there was such a deep connection with her and Will, and I really believed in their chemistry. Will's character, especially in the present day timeline, I wasn't the biggest fan of some of his actions, but to be honest, the trope that everyone says is in here, I was kind of like, wait, did I get catfished? Because I didn't necessarily think that this book had that trope. I don't know, maybe I just see things differently than other people, but to me, there were some iffy things, but I wouldn't necessarily say this has the trope that everyone hates in it. But I enjoyed it overall. I thought it was really well written. The summery resort setting was perfect, and then the things that our main character was dealing with, the subplots, the storyline, had so much depth and so many layers to it. I don't know, I just thought it was really well done, and I loved the past and present timelines. I can see where some people would think that the day they spent in the past together did feel a little bit rushed, but to me, I don't know, their connection and their chemistry just felt very believable. I loved the way that the past and present timelines would flip back and forth. I feel like we got the perfect amount of information from each timeline at the perfect moments. I do have a few critiques of it. Like, I do feel like it was slow in some places. I do think there could have been a little bit more buildup in the present day before things started happening, and the ending and the little conflict that happened wasn't necessarily my favorite. Overall, I did like this one, and it was unexpected. It was a very pleasant surprise. Maybe because I went into it with low expectations, I liked it more than I expected to, but I enjoyed this one and I would recommend it for the summertime. Then I ended up listening to the audio of Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. It's a Japanese novel translated into English, and the audiobook is super short. It's like 3 hours long, so it's a really quick one, and I'd always been interested in picking this one up because of what I'd heard about it. Basically, in this book we follow our main character Keiko, and she is kind of unconventional, a little bit different from her peers and from her family. She works at this convenience store, and the older she gets, she just continues to work there over the span of like years and years, and her friends and family always get on to her like, why do you still work there? When are you gonna get a real job? When are you gonna get married and start a family? So a lot of great commentary in this book on societal norms and conformity and doing what's best for you, and I gave this one 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite thing, but it was enjoyable in the moment. I really did like our main character. She was very like quirky and unconventional, and she was really fun to read about. It did get a little bit repetitive. There's one character in here in particular who I feel is supposed to purposefully be the unlikable character, and I don't know, I feel like the stuff that this character did, it just got so repetitive. Like, they kept repeating themselves over and over, and I'm like, okay, we get it. I also feel like the side characters in here all shared this same societal view on how people's lives should look, and I get that that was kind of the point to drive home the theme of this story, but like I said, it did get a little bit repetitive by the end. But I did enjoy this one overall, and our main character was quirky and fun to read about. And then I finished the month with another audiobook and listened to Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This one follows a married couple, Leah and Muri, and it takes place in past and present timelines. Leah, I'm not 100% sure what her job title is, but she's like an oceanographer, marine biologist. She ends up going on a deep sea mission, and she's there a lot longer than is expected. And so we're following her perspective in the past as we see what kind of went down during this deep sea mission. And then in the present, she ends up coming home to her wife Muri, and we see that Leah is not the same as before she went on this deep sea mission. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was another quick, easy audiobook to listen to. I think it was like maybe 5-6 hours long at normal speed, so it's a quick and easy one. And I would recommend it for summer. It had lots of detailed descriptions of the ocean. I'm very fascinated by like ocean life and how there's so much of the ocean that's unexplored, and it really talks about that a lot of the book. I feel like there was a lot of symbolism in this book that kind of went over my head. Some things that were mentioned, I'm like, I feel like that's significant, but I don't really know how, so some things I'm gonna have to look up. This one is, I believe, supposed to be a horror novel, and it did have that haunting element to it. I feel like it was leading up to be more than it ended up being. The ending kind of left me with some questions, and I do feel like things were a little bit unclear. But the past and present timelines and seeing the 2 wives' perspectives and what they were going through was really interesting to read about. So I would recommend it for summer, mostly because of the descriptions of the ocean and the sea, but not my favorite thing ever. And those are the 8 books that I read in the month of June, so that's going to conclude the wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, let me know in the comments. Let me know what y'all read in June. If you read any of the same books that I did, I would love to hear all of your thoughts on them. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe if you are not already, so that you don't miss out on any future book videos from me. And I'll see you guys so soon in the next one. Bye guys.